Hey everybody, this is Fiore Cerecci. I am a professor, and I'm also a person who helps out various people in organizations such as the Warrior Scholar Program, where we help veterans. I work for a couple consulting firms. Um, but today I want to talk about one of the things that gets me really excited, that fuels me in all of my work, and that is literature. And I recently was asked by one of my students, a teenager, um, if I had ever read War and Peace, and I had to say no. I guess you can't read everything, but I did. I went and read it. I read it very willingly, and I was very surprised, even though it's incredibly long. Very surprised at how inspiring it was, how it just got me thinking. It took a while to get into it, to be honest. But today I want to talk about one of the things about War and Peace that are really not my own ideas, but an idea that I read in the back of this edition. They have these great editions by Norton called the Norton Critical Edition. If you ever want to get deeper into a book, you get a Norton Critical Edition, and they have a lot of people who comment on it and stimulates your thinking. It's also good for writing papers because you get to read the major commentators on a work. Even a work that's pretty old, they'll kind of do this wonderful thing where they'll include people that have written about it through the ages. So that's exciting for me. I hope to make it exciting for you. And we'll just jump right in with what is special about Tolstoy. So War and Peace, just very quickly, is about essentially Napoleon's invasion of Russia in the early 1800s, told from the Russian point of view. You can imagine the people who've read this beautiful kind of detailed memory of the various battles and the underground feelings, the way the soldiers felt. Tolstoy has all that time. The 19th century is the century of very long novels where he takes the time to really explain the events, but more importantly, the sentiments, the feelings, and the actions of many individuals. And so, it's written, I think, 30 years afterwards, 30, 40 years afterwards. He himself was a soldier. That helps a lot. It got me interested in that because I'm very interested in people who have been in wars, have been veterans. Doing another project where I've interviewed people since I was a teenager, people who lived through World War II. So it's really interesting to see how this novel unfolds. But there's something that one of the commentators says that really got me thinking about the way we write and the way we read. And it's really interesting. So just to be sure here is sometimes it's great to see what these writers look like. We're kind of past the time in literature where, the author doesn't matter, the author is dead, doesn't matter about the author's life. I mean, I think it does matter who the author is, what she or he or they look like. And that is a photograph, a 19th century photograph of Leo Tolstoy. And so to just jump right in, the guy I'm talking about, the commentator, is called Isaiah Berlin. Isaiah Berlin is a very famous 20th century critic, professor, intellectual, and he writes a lot about literature, but he also writes about general ideas of philosophy and politics. And he has a book called I think it's called The Fox and the Hedgehog. There are two kinds of thinkers: the ones that are like a fox that move around and they draw their energy from a lot of different sources, and the hedgehog is a person who develops one way of thinking. One is not necessarily better than the other, just a way of talking about different types of creators. So Isaiah Berlin says that Tolstoy's sense of reality is magnificently autonomous. This is me explaining it. This is my own notes here. The characters are not representations, but are simply there. And then he says, nor yet calling for, dependent on some process of reasoning in the mind of the reader, but always a solid object set in absolutely specific context and time and space. So at first it's like, okay, fine. There are characters out there. They're very well detailed. A lot of times we talk about literature. We say, the character, I like the detail. I like the way that I feel like I'm there with the characters. People say that a lot about books they read. In fact, people only like books where they feel that they're truly involved, engaged in the same space even as the characters. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought maybe Berlin is saying something more than that as well. And I think what he's saying is that a lot of writers kind of depend on you to fill in all those parts that they don't explain. And we read a lot of books. Say I read a book like there's just a recent book that one of my students read that became a movie. Where a young girl is in North Carolina, and she lives alone in a cabin. She falls in love and she loves nature. But there's a lot about the things in the book that make the reader kind of already aware of what kind of person it might be. Even just the word North Carolina, the fact she lives in lowlands and swamps. And, I think what Berlin is saying is that Tolstoy draws these characters in such a detailed way, in such a kind of independent way that's independent of whether you know about Russia or not, whether you know about Napoleon or not. And they just kind of stand there. Now, I may be wrong about Berlin, and I welcome you to say your own ideas in the comments. But that's what I get from it. And it took me a long time to read the book and a long time to kind of even like the characters because he develops them so slowly. But maybe that's what Berlin is saying, that he just lets the characters be themselves fully. And this is just the citation, Isaiah Berlin from Hedgehog and Fox. I probably have the title a little bit wrong. It's not that I'm lazy. It's that sometimes I like to hang there with the memory that I have rather than always go and rush and try to find the exact thing on Google, just trying to get a little independence from Google a little bit. But it is quoted in page 1132 of one of my favorite editions, as I say, the Norton Critical. And this is me kind of developing the idea a little bit more. What I learned, you have kind of writing that you leave the process of imagination to the reader, so you don't have to fill in as many details. And the others are creating a monument out of your writing, so it does not matter where the reader is. It doesn't matter what culture the reader hails from, or what time, what gender, what identity. The characters are there waiting for the reader to come to it and discover them. It doesn't reach out to the reader and ask the reader to do some imaginative work, although I have a feeling that's hard to do. But anyway, this is what I got from Berlin. The writing stands alone, waiting like a grand piece of architecture to be discovered. So I can imagine going to a place like, Iran and visiting some of those glorious, palaces of, 5,000 years ago, and in Persepolis, the ancient city of Persepolis, and just kind of being puzzled by what's there, and nothing there is appealing to me, right? Nothing's reaching out to me, nothing's calling to me. And that's cool in literature, for things to call to you and for you to identify with things. But what about other kinds of literature where it doesn't call to you, where you are required to make all the effort to go and find it, right? So I like the cover of this book. The Norton Critical edition is probably an older edition. But I like it because the painting is by a Russian painter, and it's painting one of the scenes, early in the book, long before all the tragedy hits or the war really starts to kind of, sink into these people, where Prince Andrei, the guy in white, is falling in love, or they're both falling in love with Natalie, I think her name is. The real hero of the novel, though, is the guy in glasses up to the back left here. So you see my mouse there. His name is Pierre. And he is the one who really develops and learns through war and through loss, through being a prisoner, being wounded. He kind of develops really, truly. But I like the painting because it is so kind of apologetic, you know. It's kind of, it's in a particular place with particular people, and that's a great thing about older paintings, that all the stuff that's kind of boring about older paintings maybe is actually one of its advantages, that it's so specific. The uniforms, the way people stand, uh the look, you know. I mean, who wears shoes like that? Who wears stock? It's kind of just saying, look, this is who we were. This is just exactly what this was. Now, some people, you know, of course, uh, I'm recording this at a time when there's a Ukraine war, and War and Peace was written and at a time in the 19th century where Ukraine was part of Russia, and I'm not, you know, kind of trying to take sides. I teach students from all over the world. I've taught many Russian students, many Ukrainian students, and I just want to talk about literature here. So I hope that that part of it will not interfere with this, because I really want to talk about this work of literature and this way of writing that, you know, kind of validates experience in a different way than many other books will validate experience. So that's basically my you know, my take on Tolstoy. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it'll encourage you to go and read a little bit of War and Peace. It's actually really fun to read. It did take me, I mean, just to look here how thick it is, Mamma Mia. It did take me a few months to read it, but little by little, you know, 5 minutes, 20 minutes at a time, and it starts to sink in. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening so much. And I hope to hear from you in your comments.